incident response tracking. So this model is what we are aiming for now. And let me back up a second. So when we're talking about incident response, here we're supposed to be talking about shootings and stabbings. So this is our newest initiative that we've been implementing with our Apricot system. Last year was mostly about getting everyone onto the platform, kind of getting familiarized with the platform. And now it's like using it to our advantage, right? And trying to create maybe some dashboards or some automations so that we can be ready for questions that we're always asked as an office. So we're focusing on shootings and stabbings. Because as you saw, like potentially every office in our cluster plays a part in responding to these incidents, whether it's the people who go out there right away, or maybe it's the people who go out there like a week later to see what needs remain in the community, or follows up with the victims and sees what resources they might need to be connected to. So the goal is to be able to easily track all of our incident responses under the corresponding incident, right? So right now, everything is kind of track. Everyone does respond to the incidents, but then if we're asked like, okay, what did OPS do for this? We still have to kind of go to every office and ask what happened, and still like define incident for them and things like that. So now this is the next stage of making that more cohesive, so that when the mayor or someone asks, we can easily answer, and also we can see for ourselves, right? See if our programming is what it needs to be, and it is what we say that it should be. So yes, this is the model that we're actively building right now and actively training for. So basically, we get incident reports from the police department, and that's always been a thing. And the designated person, which is usually the data manager from the Office of Safe Neighborhoods, makes a profile for that incident. So that's the incident profile here. And I'll show you an example of what it looks like in the actual system. And whenever offices do anything in response to that specific incident, they will just like link their forms, and everything will fall under basically this folder, right? So if anyone asks like, oh, what did you do for that shooting that happened on this date at this time? You just pull up that folder and you can open it and see we did all these things, right? And we can like build reports off of it. We could send, regular updates to whatever offices need them, and just make it a lot cleaner, right? So here's an example of kind of what this looks like. So if you remember before, the one that we looked at up here was the person's name. So now up here is actually the incident name. And in Philadelphia, and I don't know if this is a common thing with all police departments, but there's a district control number that all incidents are given. And that's what this is here. And it's just a unique ID for that incident. So we have the date, we have the time, we have like what kind of incident it is. We even have motive sometimes. So this one was a group, so potentially like a gang situation. We have programs that were assigned to engage with the incident. We have some general notes about the incident, and this is all stuff we get from the police and then from later narratives as well. We are able to link people to the shooting. So we not only have the incident level, but now we have individual level, right? And then once again, we see which programs are involved currently, or at the time, currently with these incidents, right? So it's like easy to just like open up the incident folder, see what it was, see who's responding. And even if I wanted to, I could click into the specific programs and see what their specific responses were, right? And like follow along with they followed up, or if they referred to someone else, and just track their whole progress that way. Here's another portion of that. So in the other slide that I showed, we were starting with the incident and adding responses. Now we're starting with the response and adding the incident to it. So for example, the Office of the Victim Advocate does crime scene cleanups. And they do crime scene cleanups for any incident that leaves any kind of bodily fluid around. I'd say. So it's not necessarily shootings and stabbings, but if it is a shooting or stabbing, then they will click yes, and then this little thing will pop up and say, "Hey, can you link the shooting or stabbing that you're talking about?" And and then that will put their response right under with everyone else's, right? And so it can be activated either way if you would do the incident first or if you do the response first. And that's just based on the office. So the office of the victim advocate is just used to submitting these forms anyway. So I said, don't worry about it. I'll just add a little link. I don't want you to have to click on a bunch of other things. And then for some people, they like to go to the incident first. But I think that that versatility has been really helpful in garnering the buy-in from our staff. All right, so this is basically like everything that we've been talking about here, but just like in like one graphic, right? So we're trying to look at individuals. We're trying to look at incidents. We're trying to track what programs they're coming from. We're trying to see like who was assigned to who was enrolled in what. And an issue that we've always run into is that uh, an individual can be involved in several incidents, right? But an incident can have several individuals, and those individuals can be, like it just gets very messy when it's not all linked together. And so like even in creating this graphic, it was like I don't even, I had to remind myself even what I was doing a couple times. Um, and that just shows like how messy it's been and kind of why this integration has taken the back burner for a while, because it's like, obviously we are dealing with real world problems and real situations and people in crises and things like that, to where it's like, we can't take a break and stop and figure things out like this. But now we can, and we have, and we're on our way to really making it a better data process. So but like now being able to go from an incident to knowing who was involved to taking on these individuals as OPS program participants and seeing how many programs they're involved with, things like that. It just helps to create a clearer picture of our entire data universe, right? Allowing us to identify like, oh, there's a gap here. We need to like add a resource here, or we need to add another link here. Or it may affirm what we're already doing. Like, oh, we have this many programs in the Northeast. It looks like the Northeast needs those programs, so we're doing all right. And if we, want to try to expand programming in the future, this is a very powerful resource to show what we're doing, right? So if we're going for funding, if we're going for grants, if we're going for, to hire more staff, to have this data under us to support and to show our point, has been really effective, honestly. All right, so I will end here with some tips and best practices, just some things that we've learned throughout this process. So number one, prioritizing data fidelity and security has been like the top thing, right? So data fidelity, so just how secure, I mean, how quality is your data and how consistently quality is your data? Because uh, if you have a bunch of data, but it's not good, or it's not clean, or it's not accurate, it's not usable, right? And all the good things that we just talked about like the granting and the expanding and everything, you can't support that, right? Statistically or like data wise, if you're trying to take a research evidence-based thing, right? So prioritizing the fidelity is important, and that comes with a lot of training. So training the operational staff, training even our data staff to know what to look out for, knowing what terms to put it in for operational staff. And then like the data security, right? So we deal with some data that is highly sensitive. For example, like juvenile data. And we've had to acquire a lot of like data licensing agreements and things like that to even house it in our system. And so like maintaining that security is crucial for obviously the safety of the kids, but also the security of our relationships with, the police or with whoever we're getting the data from, who's trusting us with the data. Um, and then it's been important to develop these standards and definitions, right? So anytime there's been a break in our Apricot system, or we realize that there's been a trend of inputting things incorrectly, or we have to go back and change like a whole slew of things, we realize that whatever group it was didn't fully understand what they were supposed to actually be doing, right? Or we were saying the same thing, but not meaning the same thing, right? So, for example, I just specified that like when we're talking about incidents, in this case, we're talking about specifically shootings and stabbings, right? And so we have to be really specific about it. But there are other things, for example, like even the word meeting came up. People have been tracking the meetings that they've been having in the community, and we eventually had to specify like, okay, were you holding the meeting or were you attending the meeting? And then does that make a difference for the program? And it actually does. And so now we need to specify like what a meeting is versus what a training is, things like that, where you like, it's annoying, but you have to get down to the nitty gritty, right? Or like, what is an intervention, right? Or what is outreach? Because some programs consider outreach to be going and doing a home visit, right? Or making a call. Some programs consider outreach if you're just if you're able to connect with someone on social media. Like if you're able to find someone on social media and like inbox them or DM them, they'll count that as like, all right, we checked on them, and like for whatever program that might work, but it's not universal. So things like that. Also in terms of like data fidelity, just even in the way that we create our forms and our fields has been really important. So for example, uh, using things like drop down options or like radio buttons instead of checkboxes or text fields, if we can avoid it, because we just want to keep everything standardized, right? So even in things where like we do work in different police districts, so we'll say like, oh, the second district or the third district, some people might be writing just the number 3, some people might be writing 3RD or spelling out the whole third. And then now on the reporting side, it looks like 3 different things, even though we're all talking. So drop downs, work out, or radio buttons where people don't type in their own things. And so then that goes into operational staff, as I was talking about before. I think a lot of times when data initiatives are implemented or are launched, they kind of stay at that data level, and then like the data people figure it out, and then they bring it to the operational people and say like, all right, this is what we're doing, and we want the report next week. And the operational people are like, this doesn't even make sense, for like what we're doing. And it becomes one of those things where it's just like, oh, the higher ups are just giving us something else to do, and like, the buy-in is not there, and it's just like, we already have so much work to do, and they do, right? So it's been really important for us to like, even when we have these preliminary database building meetings, to include some operational, at least like leadership operational staff, because it might work one way in my mind and it looks beautiful in the system and the data is all connected and everything's great. But then we might talk to an operational leader and they say like, hey, this person actually doesn't even have access to this, or like this person actually wouldn't even know how to answer this question, or this happens after hours. So what happens if, so-and-so's not available? And that's things that we just don't know, at our level. So including the people who are actually going to be collecting the data is very important. Because like I said, the data that you have, if it's not good, it kind of doesn't matter, right? And so that entry point is very important. And then I'd also say like automate or import wherever you can. So I know Apricot has a couple automation options, and we've utilized them a lot. And also some import options, because we had data systems before that just needed to come in, and those are huge import projects. And just being able to have that historical data in there as well for comparison has been great. And then the last thing I'll say is to pair the data that we're getting from incident response or whatever tracking that you're doing with other software. Like we do a lot of pairing with mapping. We use ArcGIS a lot, and thankfully Apricot stuff is usually easily exportable and then importable into ArcGIS. And we get maps like this, right? So over here is a representation of like all the shootings that happened last year, minus 2 years. So I think till October 2024. And then like overlaid on that over here is our incident response. And so it's really cool. And this is actually just one group's incident response. It's really cool because you can see that what you're doing is actually targeted to where the issues are, and so you feel validated, right? You're like, okay, we're reaching what needs to be reached, right? And this is something we can go to the mayor with, or we can go to grant funders with, or whatever, and say, hey, we're seeing where the problems are, and we are actually going out there, and look how well it's lining up, right? So it's really encouraging for us to see things like this, and I think turning things into visuals like this is very impactful as well.